Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Hilliard MacBeth, author of the second edition of the book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. He's also a portfolio manager and financial advisor in Edmonton. Welcome back to the show, Hilliard.
Thanks for inviting me on.
Hilliard, an interesting thing that came across Bloomberg, legal pot sales in Canada down 33% quarter to quarter. Have 33% of pot users decided to give up the use of the drug over the last 3 months, or are government-sponsored liquor stores across the country just doing a poor job and overcharging people, and have they been chased back to the black market where we're told the quality is better and the prices are lower?
I mean, I've been skeptical about this all the way through, and you know, there's quite a few of the companies like Aurora. Aurora is based in Edmonton. Canopy is based in, I think, Ontario, but some people made some really big dollars on those stocks out of the gate, and including a couple of clients of mine. But that would only be if they sold, because, for instance, Aurora was up around $12, and now it's down to $4 or something like that. So the bloom is definitely off the rose there. And I think my feeling from the very beginning was, why would people pay double or triple in a store when they could get it? If they've been using marijuana all along, they've obviously been getting it from a supplier somewhere. And if the quality is okay and they know the supplier and it's cheaper, then there's a certain amount of loyalty there, I think. So the stores had an uphill battle from the very beginning, I think, and the costs are much higher. I saw, for instance, in the City of Edmonton police budget, they've added $6 million for enforcing, ensuring that people go to the legal stores as opposed to going to the black market. And obviously that's not nearly enough, but and they still fail no matter how much money they spent on it. So the whole thing is kind of up in the air right now, and I don't think it's going to get better anytime soon.
Well, BC has done such a poor job of rolling out legal pot sales. This province is only second in legal pot money. Only Little Prince Edward Island is selling less legal pot than BC. Alberta is selling the most, and it was kind of surprising to me, being Alberta was probably the province most opposed to legal pot, but Alberta also being a province that embraces free enterprise. Is it free enterprise that sells marijuana in Alberta?
I haven't studied it, but I know the liquor store thing. There was what happened with the liquor stores when they went private on that was it used to be the Alberta Liquor Control Board years ago, and then they decided to open it up to retail stores, and a whole bunch of people got licenses to open a retail store, and then within a few years, the consolidators came in and bought up all those little one-man or one-person stores and made it into big chains. So there's a couple of big chains now that control pretty much all the private liquor store sales. And I don't know in the marijuana. It was different in the marijuana. There's a couple of big players, like Fire and Flower, for instance, is one that I know of, that was trying to open up retail stores all across Alberta. There was a lottery of some sort. You could go and put your name in the lottery, and if you got chosen, then you get to open a store. You couldn't just open up a store without any license. You had to get a license, and they distributed those through lotteries. And then you could then sell to a company like Fire and Flower your position in the lottery if you won. So you never have to act. I don't know if you had to open up a store and then have Fire and Flower buy it from you, or if you just turned it over to Firefly. I don't know how to, and I shouldn't pick on that one. It's just the only one I know the name of. But I'm sure there's lots of stuff going on. I did talk to one commercial real estate landlord, and he said, "Oh, I love the retail marijuana people because they spend so much money and they don't care about cost." So it's yes, I don't know if they're under the influence while they're negotiating their leases or what it is, but he was very happy because, as everybody knows, the economy in Alberta has been really difficult for about the last 5 years since oil. So this is the one bright spot on the horizon. So if this starts to falter, then that's going to be unfortunate for retail stores in Alberta.
And of course, somebody said, with sales down 33% over 3 months, only the government could lose money selling drugs. But Oregon had the same problem. They had overpriced the product. They brought their prices down, maybe reduced taxes on it, and they upped the penalties for people who illegally sold pot. Although I think stiff penalties never deterred drug dealers, no matter where they are in the world. Take a look at Saudi Arabia, where they get their heads chopped off.
Yeah, and I think in Colorado they legalized it some time ago, and there was an initial flurry. It lasted about 6 to 9 months, and then it went right back to the way it was, pretty much. So there, this could be what's happening in Canada, and it was amazing. There was a big, very big company called Constellation that bought into one of the big Canadian distributors, I guess the grower and distributor, and at a very high valuation. And I think they wanted to get a foothold in the industry, thinking that Canadians. It wasn't that long ago they were talking about Canadian companies expanding all over the world, but that seems to be those days of optimism have pretty much disappeared entirely now, I think.
Also, too, with over-regulation, you boost the prices, and does that make selling it legally, commercially unviable when you have governments that rarely take a look at business circumstances, take a look at what seems to be a government war on small business, the biggest supplier of jobs in the country?
Well, yeah, I mean, the next step would be for small business that are in the retail distribution to say that the government regulations are too onerous and too expensive, and it's holding them back. So that happens quite often. But really, was it a problem that needed to be solved? If we go right back to the basics, there was no problem here. There wasn't a problem. It didn't need to be solved, and so I guess it's one of those things that happened. But I think there's bigger issues out there.
Well, BC had hundreds of I call them semi-legal pot dispensaries where people could get their medical marijuana. Now the medical marijuana supply has been cut off, and cancer patients can't get it. And what they can find is totally overpriced.
I had a friend who went through the process in Alberta to get some for a medical condition. It wasn't cancer; it was something else, and the CBD ingredient was supposed to help, and allegedly the hallucinogenic aspect of it was taken out, the part that gets you high, and the THC. So it was supposed to be just the CBD, and he had to go to 2 different places. He had to get a prescription from his doctor. And even then, when they said it was CBD only, it turned out that it still had lots of THC in it. And that was through the official channels, not through the black market. So anyway, I have to ask him. I'll see him next week. I'll have to ask him, are you still on that stuff? It's like, I don't know. But when he described it, it was so convoluted and so complicated. It was just crazy, right? So I think the medical one is extremely difficult to solve. There's, the medical people tell me that there just aren't any studies that can prove the benefits, and yet a lot of people get relief from the pain. So I don't know. It's I guess maybe they had to do something. Maybe they had to bring some regulation into it. But we're a long way from making it better. It's almost like we've made it worse. Jody
Emery, longtime pot advocate. said, when they have legal pot, they're going to overprice it. She says it doesn't cost anything more to grow a marijuana plant than it does to grow a cabbage. And that's how much they should be charging you for it. What does a cabbage cost in the grocery store? And look at how much you get.
So the other thing too is they allow you a number of plants. And I thought, is it 4, 5, or 10? I forget how many plants you can grow for personal use as part of the legislation. So if the prices are too high, people might just revert to that. And of course, then you don't have I guess the sales pitch would be, well, we control the THC and we control the CBD, and then it was right around this time that they were supposed to be bringing out edibles as well, but I don't know if that was delayed. I didn't hear.
Edibles have been made legal, but after that was in October, but they have to get approved by Health Canada and other regulatory bodies. They may be legally for sale sometime before Christmas, but it seems anything to do with pot is always overly delayed, and who knows if that'll actually happen.
Yeah, and it's very dangerous. I mean, you talk about how do you protect it from children getting a hold of it, or animals. And I mean, it's just there's a lot of issues, and we've got bigger issues in Canada. This is not. We've got Alberta's threatening to separate, and the oil is still not moving to market, and now Alberta and Quebec are fighting quite openly. In fact, it's probably the most antagonistic I can remember it since the 1970s, when Peter Lougheed and Pierre Trudeau were fighting over who controlled the oil industry in Canada. So anyway, I guess the pot's a good distraction.
Well, we have the Bloc Québécois leader saying he's against pipelines, he's against oil, but he certainly hasn't said anything about not accepting transfer payments from Ottawa, which is money that has been gathered up in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC, because those provinces don't get transfer payments.
Yeah, I think Ontario and Alberta are the two that generally have mostly been paying more in than they've been getting out.
Ontario at least gets a few dollars worth of transfer payments, but I call it the far west. Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC don't. Yeah,
I just saw an article I didn't look closely enough at it to remember the details, but they traced the history of it over the years, but equalization is definitely at risk right now, and the problem is that it is one of the things that ties the country together. So the degree of upset in Alberta is just hard to describe how upset people are. And when Eastern Canada doesn't seem to want Alberta oil, and Alberta oil can't be shipped south because of delays in approval of Keystone XL, and it can't make it through Burnaby, BC because of problems shipping there, Albertans are pretty upset. And but the more Albertans complain, the worse it gets, because people feel that Alberta's had it pretty good for a long time. So why are they complaining? So this is about as bad as I can remember it. I briefly worked in the Intergovernmental Affairs Department of the Alberta government in the 70s, and so I went to some of the meetings in Ottawa and was involved in the discussions as a junior member of a team. And today feels as bad as it, maybe worse than what it was back then.
Mm-hmm. Well, the National Post today has put out an article showing how Alberta pays Quebec's bills. Over the last 11 years, Albertans have paid out almost $240 billion to the rest of Canada. Where's the rest of Canada for Alberta when they need the help?
Yeah, it's and I don't think it'll be forthcoming, because Alberta, generally is still a pretty wealthy province, and I don't think it's going to continue. I think Alberta's in for some tough times, but I don't think the sympathy is there for Alberta yet, because everything is still pretty, comparatively speaking, to the rest of Canada. Everything is still pretty good in Alberta. But what people in Alberta don't know, they don't notice that. What they notice is what it's like today versus what it was like 5 years ago, and there's distinct difference to the negative since 5 years ago, since the OPEC, the famous meeting in December of 2014 when OPEC said we're just going to let the market price the oil. We're not going to try and influence it anymore, and that was the end of OPEC, and that was the end of the boom times in the oil market. And I don't think they're coming back because, as you and I've talked about before, things like electric cars and this growing political trend to fight climate change is going to really hurt the oil industry for a long time to come. So people that are waiting for the oil boom days to come back are going to be waiting for forever, I think.
We'll have more with Hilliard MacBeth right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard MacBeth. Hilliard, the last time we talked, we mentioned that Saskatchewan was seeing bankruptcies and consumer proposals skyrocket. Is Ontario now in the same basket?
Yeah, the numbers came out recently, and nationally there was a 20% increase in consumer insolvencies. So insolvencies include bankruptcies and consumer proposals, and the biggest jump was in proposals. So just a reminder, proposals are for people that just want to deal with their credit card debt and their other kind of debts like that, but they don't want to, the house and the mortgage is not involved. To get the slate cleaned, including the mortgage on the house, bankruptcy is required. So far the jump has been only in proposals. And what shocked me in the numbers that came out a few days ago was that Ontario had a 28% increase. So Alberta's been elevated for quite a long time. Recently, as we talked last time, Saskatchewan showed a big jump. And again, Saskatchewan was participating in the boom with oil and potash and things like that, and that's over now for Saskatchewan. BC is starting to show signs of a jump in proposals, probably related to real estate. But for Ontario to jump 28% year over year, that's a pretty significant thing, because obviously there's way more people in Ontario. But also Ontario has been enjoying, there has been some slipping in house prices in Ontario, but it's been mild compared to what's happening in the prairies and in Vancouver. So generally, when people's house prices have been rising, they've been able to refinance. They don't have to go see the bankruptcy trustee and do a consumer proposal. So the fact that they're starting to show up in large numbers at the trustee's office in Ontario is a sign that the debt bubble is starting to burst. Acquaintance of mine, Doug Hoyes, he does the podcast. He's good, really good, and not just when he interviews me, but when he interviews other people. He tells me that they've never been busier. They just can't keep. They're expanding. They've got 28 stores in Ontario, and they're expanding, and they can't keep up. And the thing that he told me was that most people think it's people that are, down and outers, or people that have problems, serious problems, or people that lose their jobs and stuff like that. But he says no. Most of the time, it's regular people, and all it takes is just one bad incident. One little thing to go wrong, and they're so close to the edge with their debts that they end up coming to see him to do something about the proposals. So if that's starting to happen, then it's a sign that, no, it might be just a sign that the economy is starting to weaken in Canada, and that's what we've expected. In fact, it could easily be that Canada's already in a recession. The numbers since the election have been much more negative than the numbers were before the election. But whether we're in a recession or not, there's a limit to how much money people can borrow and how much money they can pay back, and we seem to have reached that limit.
We'll have more with Hilliard MacBeth right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard MacBeth. Hilliard, what are company profits doing compared to what's happening on the stock markets?
So as most people know, the U.S. stock market has been soaring the last few years. Since the global financial crisis 10 years ago, the market in the U.S. has more than tripled in value. But some of us have been analyzing why those gains are happening, and it turns out that there's a couple of things. First of all, the stock market value is usually based on earnings. So if you buy a company, you're basically buying the future stream of the earnings, or you buy a piece of a company, you get a piece of the earnings. And that's for, hundreds of years, that's been the way stocks are priced. But there's a couple of things that can happen. In boom times, people can decide, they're pretty optimistic and they want to pay a higher valuation for a certain set of earnings. And that's certainly been the case recently. So that's one explanation. The other thing is interest rates are so low that when somebody goes to the bank and says, I want a GIC or something, they don't like the answer, so they go to an advisor and say, well, what can you do? And they say, well, there's the stock market, but it's riskier. And they say, well, yeah, I have to take the risk because I need a higher return. So that was pushing it up. But then also what you were getting was earnings per share. So the way they calculate it is earnings per share. And earnings per share can be affected by a number of things. One of the big ones in the last few years, it turns out, is share buyback. So companies are going to the bond market, borrowing money, and buying back their own shares. And that reduces, first, that does two things. It increases the share value from the buying power of the company buying back its own shares. But it also shrinks the number of shares. So the earnings per share, with a smaller number of shares, goes up, even though earnings are not really going up at all. The next thing is that more recently, in the last couple of years, that has really helped has been a tax cut. So the tax cut that was brought in a couple of years ago by the Trump administration in the U.S. Cut the corporate tax rate quite dramatically, and that helped a lot of companies. And then, of course, the third thing, which is helping everybody, is lower interest rates. So the companies that have a lot of debt are paying low interest. So earnings after tax have been helped by all those things. So some analysts came to my attention have gone back and said, yes, but what about if we take all those factors out? What's actually happening to earnings? And it turns out, and the U.S. has such great data. They have all these Federal Reserve boards, and the one in St. Louis, Federal Reserve Board of St. Louis, has a big research team. You can go on the internet and find it under FRED or FRED. And they've got everything in there. And one of the things they have in there is the corporate profits of all the companies in the U.S., not just the companies that report on the S&P 500 or on the stock market, but all the companies. And I was a little surprised to see very recently, like yesterday, a new report out that said that profits have peaked, and they peaked quite a while ago at the end of 2014. So the profits in general have been in a downward trend overall. This is profits before taxes. And of course the share count doesn't come into it because they're not doing it per share. They're doing total corporate profits. And they've been declining for 5 years now. They're lower today than they were 5 years ago. So the stock market gains have been basically a function of all these other factors, but the actual underlying value of companies has not been growing. So one of the things that we've talked about before is how the U.S. market is so expensive relative to the rest of the world, and this just reinforces that. Other parts of the world, like Europe and Japan, corporate profits are actually increasing, and the stock markets are much, much cheaper than they are in the U.S. So another warning sign for the U.S. market that it may be in a serious bubble. And I don't know when it would end. Obviously, usually it's a recession that causes stock market bubbles to burst. But we don't know. It could be an exogenous event as well, like a war or something like that. But something will come along, and people will be surprised to learn that corporate profits have not been growing, even though earnings per share have been growing.
Now, Tesla, people have been predicting their demise of the car company for a long time, yet it keeps expanding. I think their plant in China is now working, and they're now in Germany.
Yeah, it's amazing. The plant in China, just before we get to Germany, is it was announced in January of 2019. Now, a bit of background there. China has been really pushing hard for electric vehicles. There's a bunch of littler companies in China that are trying to bring out electric cars, electric SUVs. BYD is one. It's actually Berkshire. Warren Buffett's involved in that one, and it's mostly buses and bigger vehicles. NIO's one. But the big one, the big announcement was Tesla going in there in January, and they went from basically an empty field to a plant producing cars from January till today, so basically 11 months. And I think they're saying that there could be as many as 17,000 Model 3s produced in that plant by December 31st, which is an amazing accomplishment. Now, China, of course, everybody knows in China the government is backing Tesla, and they go to the banks and tell the banks to back Tesla, and they're giving Tesla every kind of help that they can, and because they want to solve their pollution problem, they want more electric cars. And so now there's still a bit of a question mark because some of the tax credits or the subsidies for buying an electric car have expired in China, and I haven't seen the announcement that they've been renewed or expanded, but I suspect they will be. The other thing is Tesla didn't need to borrow a bunch of money on the stock market to do the China thing. They were able to get very favorable financing terms in order to build that plant. So Berlin. So a couple of days ago, this week, Elon Musk was in Berlin, and he announced that the plant in Europe, for all of Europe, will be based in Berlin, which was a real surprise. In fact, it's interesting. If you want to go on YouTube and look, you can see the announcement, and he announces it, and the two people standing beside him, for the German people, you could see they're shocked because traditionally the car manufacturing industry is not located in Berlin, in Germany. So, but obviously Tesla negotiated a good deal from the local authorities. It got a good tax breaks or subsidies or whatever they can negotiate. And so that's where they're going to start building in. Now that factory will be, if the same kind of timeline applies, that factory could be up and running by the end of 2020. And of course, that's a very big market as well. Europe is much more in the front lines in terms of fighting climate change than North America. So the potential there is pretty huge. So there's been a lot of announcements for Tesla. Their stock is up 60% year to date, I think. Although that's not unusual. The other car manufacturers like GM and Ford are also up a similar amount, but it's coming quite I think the people, they call them the Tesla Q people, TSLAQ, that were predicting bankruptcy their argument's starting to look weaker and weaker because once these cars start being widespread in Europe, I suspect they'll catch on like they have in California and other places.
Hilliard, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Nice to be on the show.
My guest has been Hilliard MacBeth, author of the second edition of the book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. What color of cover should people be looking for the newest edition, Hilliard?
The newest edition's got red on it. I think that's a sign that the warning is stronger now. Maybe that's what it is.
Hilliard's website is macbethgroup.com. If you have any questions for Hilliard or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. You can find us on Facebook. On YouTube, our channel is Talk Digital Network. On Twitter, we're at House Street. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.